We spent 400 billion credits building a weapon that freezes time itself. But the humans walked straight through it like it was a warm breeze. I have been working for the Vorathian Collective Advanced Weapons Division for approximately 17 cycles now, and I thought I had seen everything. My name is Kato, and I am what you would call a mid-level weapons engineer, which is a polite way of saying I am the person who gets blamed when things explode prematurely, but never gets credit when they explode on schedule. But this thing we built, this was supposed to be different. This was supposed to be the weapon that would finally give the collective the edge. We need it in the ongoing territorial disputes with, well, everyone really. The galaxy is a competitive place. Everyone wants the best systems, the richest asteroid fields, the most habitable planets, and everyone thinks they deserve them more than the next species. So there I was, standing in Laboratory Thatnine watching our department head, Grand Engineer, Vasanyural, practically vibrating with excitement. The guy has 6 tentacles and all 6 of them were twitching. That is never a good sign. When Vasanyural gets excited, it usually means someone else is about to have a very bad day. Colleagues, he announced, his voice booming through the laboratory's acoustics. Today we witness the culmination of 8 cycles of research, 400 billion credits of funding, and the combined efforts of our finest scientific minds. I glanced at my workstation partner, Helix, who was definitely not one of our finest scientific minds. The guy once tried to calibrate a plasma conduit with a wrench. But sure, finest minds, if that helps the budget committee sleep at night. Behold, Vasanyural continued, gesturing dramatically toward the containment chamber at the center of the laboratory. The Temporal Stasis Cascade. Now, I will give credit where credit is due. The device was impressive. It looked like someone took a small star, compressed it to the size of a cargo container, wrapped it in 40 layers of quantum shielding, then added decorative energy coils for aesthetics. It hummed with power, a low thrumming you could feel in your sensory organs. The theoretical physics team claimed it was simple local space-time hacking that slowed temporal progression to almost zero. Not true stasis, of course, since that violates about 16 physical laws, and the universe dislikes that sort of thing, but slow enough that anyone inside might as well be a statue. We activated the test. The field expanded like reality itself was being unzipped. 6 test subjects, volunteers from 6 species, froze instantly. A Grathian mid-reach, a Quelix half-shifted between dimensions, a Torthian caught mid-wing beat. Perfect stillness. The lab erupted into cheers. We had done it. A weapon that stopped anything without killing it. Over the next weeks, test after test succeeded. 53 species tested. 100% success. And we never tested humans. Why would we? They were newcomers from some Class 12 death world. Barely spacefaring, with duct tape engineering and primitive tech. Testing on humans would be like testing a warship cannon on a stubborn rock. Oh, how we would regret that. The deployment order came 3 weeks later. The target, a human cargo vessel, the SS Perseverance. A simple demonstration of power. I should have been in my lab, not on the strike cruiser Vengeance's reach. But Vasanyural insisted someone from engineering be present. We fired the Temporal Stasis Cascade. Perfect readings. 99.97% effectiveness. Officers cheered. Boarding crew deployed. Then the humans opened their own airlock. 5 of them walked out casually smiling, waving, talking, completely unaffected. One even asked if we needed a tow. Vexural panicked. We fired again at maximum strength. Space-time rippled violently. The humans did not react. One started scanning us, commenting that our field felt like an aggressive massage chair. Then they moved fast, precise, impossible under temporal distortion. They politely disarmed our soldiers, dismantled our equipment bare-handed, and critiqued our engineering choices. Reports flooded in from 3 other cruisers. Same results. Humans unaffected. One crew kept playing cards during the field. Another human commander sent a message. Nice try. Our morning coffee hits harder. At the emergency council meeting, xenobiology explained the truth. Human cells evolved on a death world, in a state of permanent crisis response. Their biology constantly adapts to fluctuations in gravity, radiation, pressure, even temporal distortions. Where normal species expect stability, humans expect chaos. Their bodies compensate for changes instantly, rerouting neural signals through quantum tunneling, recalibrating cardiovascular flow, reinforcing skeletal load, things that should be impossible. Our weapon works perfectly on rational biology. Humans do not have rational biology. Their homeworld forced them to evolve into walking physics anomalies. They are effectively immune to any quantum-based weapon. Worse, if they reverse engineer the stasis cascade, their version will work on them to their biology will simply adapt. Diplomatically, everything collapsed. Humans returned, our boarding party unharmed, sent notes on flaws in our shuttle design, and gifted us coffee and donuts, currently classified as biohazards. They didn't spread the story, but other species found out anyway. Our military reputation crashed. Allies reconsidered defense treaties. Border systems rebelled. The Galactic Stock Exchange downgraded our credit rating. And the humans, they were having the time of their lives. The Dominion's victory was not just the result of their brutality, but their unity. They moved as one mind, one purpose, one unstoppable tide consuming everything before them. Planet after planet fell. Civilizations crumbled, an entire species vanished into extinction. Only a handful of human-controlled systems remained, scattered and weakened. Command stations sent distress calls that went unanswered, fleets retreated before battles even began, and morale sank lower than it ever had in human history. But even in the darkest corners of the collapsing galaxy, sparks of resistance still flickered. Hidden bases carved into asteroid belts, secret outposts orbiting dying stars, and rogue commanders refusing to surrender, all of them holding on to the impossible hope that humanity could still rise. Among these surviving embers was a unit known only in whispers, the Black Ark Squadron. They were an elite strike group, operating outside military protocol, feared by enemies and criticized by allies. Their missions were suicidal, their casualties high, but their results undeniable. Their leader, Captain Ryland Voss, was a man forged from war, brilliant, ruthless, and haunted by every life he failed to save. Many believed he should have died years ago, but somehow he kept surviving, driven by a single promise he made long ago. The Dominion will fall. For the first time in months, the Black Ark Squadron received a new mission, one far more dangerous than any before. A mysterious signal of non-human origin had been detected from the ruins of Astron 5, a planet destroyed in the early years of the war. The signal repeated one phrase in ancient galactic code: "The key survives." If true, it meant something the Dominion failed to destroy. Something powerful, something worth risking everything for. Captain Ryland Voss knew what came next. Another impossible mission. Another chance to save what little remained of humanity. The Dominion advanced didn't slow. It accelerated. One by one the border systems fell, outposts vanished, and distress calls turned into static. Every human colony knew the same truth: help wouldn't arrive in time. The Dominion had unleashed a new war form, taller than any seen before, with spined armor and twin-bladed limbs that moved faster than a human eye could track. Entire platoons were shredded before firing a single round. But even in this nightmare, humanity did not break. Resistance cells formed on planets already half overrun, sabotaging supply lines, delaying planetary annihilation by minutes that still mattered. On Archeon Prime, a soldier named Riven Hale triggered a detonation beneath the Dominion's landing superstructure, collapsing 2 kilometers of steel and crushing thousands of invaders. He died in the blast, but his message went viral across the remaining networks. If they want our stars, they'll have to bleed for everyone. That sentence became a rallying cry. Fleet Command intercepted encrypted rumors of something even darker. The Dominion wasn't fighting for land or conquest. They were fighting because something was driving them. Something older. Something hidden behind the swarm. Admiral Kellen received a classified package from the outer patrols. A fragmented recording showing a Dominion priest-class creature kneeling before a silhouette of impossible proportions, veiled in smoke, surrounded by symbols no human had ever documented. The message ended with a single line translated from the Dominion tongue. The awakening approaches. No one knew what it meant, but the fear it triggered spread faster than any invasion. If the Dominion weren't the true enemy, then humanity was already fighting blind against the real threat rising in the dark between galaxies. We spent 400 billion credits building a weapon that freezes time itself. But the humans walked straight through it like it was a warm breeze. I have been working for the Vorathian Collective Advanced Weapons Division for approximately 17 cycles now, and I thought I had seen everything. My name is Kato, and I am what you would call a mid-level weapons engineer, which is a polite way of saying I am the person who gets blamed when things explode prematurely, but never gets credit when they explode on schedule. But this thing we built, this was supposed to be different. This was supposed to be the weapon that would finally give the collective the edge we needed in the ongoing territorial disputes with, well, everyone really. The galaxy is a competitive place. You know, everyone wants the best systems, the richest asteroid fields, the most habitable planets, and everyone thinks they deserve them more than the next species. So there I was, standing in Laboratory Theta 9 watching our department head Grand Engineer, Vasineural, practically vibrating with excitement. The guy has 6 tentacles, and all 6 of them were twitching. That is never a good sign, by the way. When Va gets excited, it usually means someone else is about to do a very bad day. Colleagues, he announced, his voice booming through the laboratory's acoustics. Today, we witnessed the culmination of 8 cycles of research, 400 billion credits of funding, and the combined efforts of our finest scientific minds. I glanced over at my workstation partner, Helix, who is definitely not one of our finest scientific minds. The guy once tried to calibrate a plasma conduit with a wrench. But sure, finest minds. Whatever helps the budget committee sleep at night. Behold. Thus Nar continued, gesturing dramatically toward the containment chamber at the center of the laboratory, the Temporal Stasis Cascade. Now, I will give credit where credit is due. The device itself was actually pretty impressive, at least from an engineering standpoint. It looked like someone had taken a small star, compressed it down to the size of a cargo container, wrapped it in about 40 layers of quantum shielding, and then decided to add some decorative energy coils just for aesthetic purposes. It hummed with power, a low therming that you could feel in your sensory organs. The principle was simple. Or at least, that is what the theoretical physics team kept telling us. The device generated a field that essentially hacked local space-time, creating a bubble where temporal progression slowed to an almost complete stop. Not quite frozen, mind you, because true temporal stasis would violate about 16 different laws of physics, and the universe tends to get cranky about that sort of thing. But slow enough that anyone caught in the field might as well be a statue for all the good movement would do. Gravity manipulation on a quantum level, they said. Rewriting the fundamental constants of motion within a defined sphere of influence, they said. It sounded like nonsense to me, but then again, I just build the thing. I do not have to understand why they work, just how to keep them from killing everyone in a 5 kilometers radius. Initiate test sequence alpha. Busnarrow commanded. And yes, he actually said it like that with the exclamation point and everything. The guy watches too many military drama. Holovid. The containment chamber's transparent walls shimmered as the test began. Inside, we had placed specimens from 6 different species, all volunteers. Of course, because the ethics committee gets really annoying if you do not have proper consent forms. There was a Graphian, a species known for their incredible reflexes, Aquilix, who could move through 3 spatial dimensions simultaneously, a Turethian, whose entire evolutionary advantage was based on rapid movement, and 3 others whose names I honestly cannot remember, because let's face it, when you work in weapons development, you start to see test subjects as data points rather than individuals. The temporal stasis cascade, activated with a sound like reality itself, was being unzipped. The field expanded outward from the device, a nearly invisible shimmer in the air, and when it touched the test subjects, the effect was immediate and absolute. They stopped, not slowed down, not paused, but stopped. The Grothian's tentacle was frozen, mid-reach. The Quelix was stuck halfway between dimensions, which looked deeply uncomfortable. The Torthian's wings were locked in mid-flap. It was beautiful in a deeply unsettling sort of way. Temporal distortion confirmed at 99.97% effectiveness, one of the technicians called out. Neural activity reduced to 3% of baseline. Muscular response completely suppressed. They are effectively statues. The laboratory erupted in cheers. Engineers were hugging each other. Tentacles and appendages waving in celebration. Datapads being thrown in the air. Vocinro looked like he might actually cry if his species had tear ducts, which they do not. But the sentiment was there. I will admit, even I was impressed. We had actually done it. We had created a weapon that could stop anything. Anyone dead in their tracks without actually killing them. The military applications were obvious and terrifying. Drop this thing on an enemy fleet, and suddenly you have a collection of very expensive floating statues. Deploy it on a planetary invasion force, and the invasion stops before it starts. The collective would be unstoppable. Deactivate the field, Bizot Tower ordered. Once he had composed himself, the shimmer disappeared, and the test subjects immediately began moving again, stumbling and disoriented, but otherwise unharmed. Perfect. A weapon that incapacitated without permanent damage meant we could actually use it without triggering half the war crime protocols in the Galactic Convention. Over the next few weeks, we ran test after test. Different species, different environments, different field strengths. Every single time, the results were the same. 100%. Success rate. The temporal stasis cascade worked on everyone. Well, almost everyone. But we did not know that yet, because, and here's where it gets funny, we had not bothered to test it on humans. Why would we? The humans were newcomers to the galactic stage, barely a century into their spacefaring era. They were from some obscure death world in the Outer Rim, a planet so hostile that most civilized species would classify it as a hazard zone. Their technology was primitive by our standards, cobbled together from stolen designs and brute force engineering. Their military was small, their influence negligible. They were, as Voss's Gnarl had so eloquently put it during one planning meeting, those primitive bipeds from that death world who somehow managed to duct tape themselves into space. The entire department had laughed at that one. Humans. Testing the temporal stasis cascade on humans would be like testing a warship's weapons on a particularly stubborn asteroid. Sure, you could do it, but why waste the resources? Oh, how we were going to regret that assumption. How we were all going to regret it so much. But for now, in this moment, standing in Laboratory Theta 9, watching our ultimate weapon perform flawlessly, we were confident, we were smug. We were absolutely certain that the temporal stasis cascade was going to change everything. And we were right about that last part, at least. It did change everything, just not in the way we expected. The deployment order came through 3 weeks after our final successful test, and I remember thinking that the timeline seemed a bit rushed. But then again, I am just an engineer. Nobody asks for my opinion on military strategy. Which is probably for the best, because my opinion is usually maybe do not do that. The target was a human cargo vessel, the SS Perseverance, which had been detected, hauling refined metals through the contested border zone between collective space and the neutral corridors. Now, technically, the humans had every right to be there. The neutral corridors were, neutral, but the collective strategic command had decided that a demonstration was necessary. Show the galaxy what our new toy could do, send a message, establish dominance. All that usual military posturing nonsense that was not supposed to be on the strike cruiser. Vengeance's reach, my job was done. The weapon worked, the field tests were complete, and I should have been back in my laboratory working on the next overpriced doomsday device. But Vossner had insisted that a member of the engineering team be present for the first live deployment, just in case any technical issues arose that needed immediate attention. So there I was, strapped into a jump seat in the observation deck of a military vessel, watching through the view screens as we approached the human ship.